Hi everyone, it's James here, and in this tutorial we're going to be creating a simple React app based on a template from a sketch design that I found online. And the cool thing that we're going to be doing in this tutorial, rather than just putting in static components, we're actually going to be creating a small API and actually pulling in data from that to actually populate the data inside of our components. So the aim of this tutorial is to create components that can be reused throughout the application, and towards the end of the video we'll create a star rating component that can be used in various places. So keep watching so you see how that gets made. But enough for the waffle, let's have a look at the template and start creating our React app. Okay, so before we get started, let's have a look at the template, the design that we're actually going to be following. So this is just a sketch template that I found online, and I'll put a link to this in the description below. But essentially it looks like a kind of e-commerce type template. And we've got this large image of the product and then some related items along with some information about the item. So what we're actually going to be doing with our React app is we're not only just going to be creating components for all of these sections, but what we'll actually do is get this data from a fake API, and then you can actually consume that and pass it down as properties to the various components rather than having to hard code any of this in. So theoretically, if we did have another blob of data that had a different product, then we could just replace that data and the component should update. Okay, so let's head over to VS Code and have a look at how the project is set up. So I've just got a basic React app set up with an app.js and some styles, etc. So that's all set up and ready to go. This code will be in a GitHub repo, and the link for that will be in the description below. So if you want to clone that and follow along or have a go at this project yourself, then it'll be there for you. So we've got everything that we need to run the app, and this is what it'll kind of look like in the browser when it's finished. The other thing is we've got a folder inside the app called server, and it's not very impressive really. All it is just a simple Express app, which is just serving this product.json file. And as you can see, just comparing what we've got in VS Code with what we've got in the browser, you can see this is all of the details from the product, and it's being passed into the components in React and then being parsed, and all the images are showing, etc. Okay, so we'll probably be referring back to this file throughout the tutorial, but let's just close it down for now. Let's get our skeleton React app up and running. And there are two things that we need to run. So in the package.json, I've given you a couple of scripts. The first one is to serve the actual front-end project with React, and there's also one for building. And I'll just add one in there for you as well for the API. And we'll just run the API that's in the server directory. So just server.js. So let's get the API up and running to start off with. So let's npm run API. Okay, so we can see that product app is listening on port 3009. So that's where we'll be getting all our product data from. And in a separate terminal, let's actually start up Webpack serving our React app as well. So npm run serve. Okay, and once that's up and running, the actual project should be running at localhost 3010. So if we just refresh the page, we should find we've got a blank project now. Okay, so the first thing I'm actually going to do in this project is actually get all of the data from the API, and I'll do that at the root app level. There might be better places to do this if this was a more complex and fully featured app, but that'll do for our example today. So I'm going to get a couple of hooks from the React library, use effect and use state. And I'm going to use the use state hook to set up a little bit of state, which, as I say, will be global to the app. And I'm just going to call that product data. Set product data is the function we'll use to set that. Use state. Oops. Use state. And then I'm going to use the use effect hook. And this will be an asynchronous operation, so we can use the await keyword in here. And when that runs on the app being created, we'll just say the product data is equal to an await statement of fetching the data from localhost, and it was just port 3009, and the endpoint that I created is just called product. I will then just change that response into JSON so we can use it within our React app. And with that done, we can then use the set product data function from the useDate hook and set the product data that's come in from our request to that state. So we only want that useEffect hook to run once when the component actually is created at the first initial. So we'll just have a dependency list of nothing there, and that should just cause it to be triggered once. So if we open up the developer tools in the browser, if we go to the network tab and just refresh the page, you can see that product data is being retrieved from the API, and then it'll be available in our React app to be passed down to the other components that we're going to be creating. So that was a nice quick win just to get our data into the React app, but of course we've got nothing on the page at the moment, so we're going to start creating some components. And I'm going to break down this template into several components. There's probably more that we can do, but just to give you an idea of how you could start splitting up a page or part of a user interface into different components. This whole thing that we can see on the page will be one component. It will be called a product component, but then we'll have a separate component for the image, a separate component up here for the information, and then we'll do one final separate component down here for the related items, which of course you could break down into further components as well. Okay, so back in our code, let's create a new component, and as I say, I'm just going to call this one the product component. So product.js. And the first thing we've got to do with all our components is just make sure that we're importing React, otherwise we're going to run into problems when we try to use them. And then for the actual definition of the component, I'm just going to use an arrow function, and we'll just export that as the default export from this particular file. Okay, so let's actually create a product inside of our main app. So we'll just do a quick check and say, is there actually any product data to display? And if there is, what we'll do is we'll display a new product component. I'm just going to pass a prop into there called product info, and that will actually be a result of the product data that we've received from our API. And then back in the actual product component itself, let's actually destructure that here. So our product info prop, we'll just extract that from the overall props. And then with that product info, what I actually want to do is get a reference to all of this different information. So when we're actually requesting the data from the API, we're getting all of this data back, but not all of it is related to an individual product. So I'm going to split up all of the different properties, such as the title description, price, features and related products, so they can be passed to the relevant components. Okay, so back in the product component, I'm just going to do a bit of destructuring here from the actual product info variable that's coming in as a prop. So we've got the title, the description, the price, the color, the features, and also the sizes. So what I'm actually going to do is just reconstruct that into a new variable. So I'll just call it product info data, for example. And we'll go title, description. In fact, we can just literally copy all of these again. So now this product info data variable has got all of the properties that we need to display the top section. We could have used the REST operator as well to do something similar, but this way we just ensure that we're only getting the properties that we need for the particular component, and also we're not going to get any random properties in there that we don't need. So another bit of destructuring again, so we also want to get the main image URL and also the property of related products, which we can pass down to another component, and that again is available on the main product info prop that we're passing in. Okay, so that's a little bit of setup for the product. So now we're going to actually return some JSX to display something. So I'm going to first of all set up an overall div with a class of product. And again, I'll just do another conditional check here to make sure that we actually have some product data passed in. And then I'm going to outline the structure for this product component. So this, don't forget, is the overall page, the overall product that we're looking at. I'm going to set up a div that's got a section called product main. And I'm also going to create another one for the related items. So these are the two sort of main sections of the actual page that we're going to be working on. Okay, so inside of these two sections of the page, I'm going to be putting in a couple of components. So let's put them in as placeholders for the moment, and we'll go and create them in just a second. So first we're going to have one for the main product image. And we're going to pass that in a prop of image URL. And we'll just pass in that main image variable that we created up here a moment ago. And also there'll be a separate component for product info. And we'll just pass that in a prop of product info, which will be the product info data variable that we created with just these properties up here. Okay, so in the related items, I'm just going to create one component inside here called related items, and say it's got some related products as a property, and this variable here will be the data that we're going to pass in as a prop. Okay, so that's the basic structure of our product. So just referring back to the actual original template. So this will be the product image component, this will be the product info component, and then of course we've got related items at the bottom of the page. Okay, so we haven't actually created those components yet, so let's go ahead and do that now. So let's create product image.js, and we need to import React again. And let's just export the actual product image component. So just as a default export again, the product image gets exported from there. And let's create the product info. In fact, I can just copy this from here and change that to info. And then finally, related items. And we can change that whole thing there to related items. Okay, so in the product image component, we're going to be getting a prop in there called main image, which I'll just destructure in the function. So for product info, it was just the product info prop there. So we can destructure that in our function definition as well. And then in related items, it was related products. So let's pop that in there as a destructuring assignment for the function. Okay, so let's actually do the product image component first, because this is going to be a quick win for us here. There's not much to put into it. We're going to just return some JSX here, and it will just be a div, and we'll give that a class of main image, and there'll just be an image inside there, an image tag with the source of the main image. And just thinking about it, I don't think that's the right prop name for that. No, sorry, yeah, it was image URL. So let's just go and change that. And let's make sure, obviously, the image is closed off as well, otherwise we'll get a JSX error. And that should be enough to get our image actually displaying. If we just refresh the page, doesn't seem to be anything happening. So let's just have a look in the dev tool, see if we've got any errors, which we do. Let's have a look what this is saying. Okay, so in the app.js file, it's saying product is not defined, which probably means we haven't imported anything yet, which isn't going to help us. So let's actually just import the product from the product.js file. So that should probably get rid of that error for us, but I bet it'll give us another one telling us that something else isn't defined. Yes, so in product.js, we need to make sure that we've got all of the other bits and pieces set up here. So let's actually import inside here the product image function. So product image, and also product info from product info. And then finally related items as well from the related items file. Okay, so that should be enough for the imports. I think also I've made a conditional thing here for product, but it's actually product info is the variable name. So let's save that and let's try refreshing the page. Okay, so it's saying there's another error there for product info. Okay, so nothing was returned from render. Okay, so yeah, we haven't actually filled anything out here yet, so maybe let's just put a little bit of placeholder markup in here just so everything works. Might need to do the same thing for related items as well. And we should have something coming back from image as well. So yeah, let's refresh the page. And finally now, yeah, we've got the actual image from our product image component actually displaying. So a little bit of setup and making sure we've got all of our imports in the right place. But yeah, we've got that component working now. Okay, so let's start working on the product info component now. Okay, and we're going to start filling in some of the JSX, and then we'll style it as we're going along. But let's put some class names into the markup as we're creating it. So we've got product info is the class name for this particular component. So let's put in a h2 to start off with. And we've got this product info prop that's been passed in. And if you remember in the product setup, this is where we set all of the title, description, etc. So that's going to be really handy for us in this component to use. So we've got product info.title, for example. You can see now there's our title appearing. So let's put a couple of other things in there as well. Let's have a heading level 3 tag. And in the product info again, we can put in the description. And let's also put in the price as well. So with the p tag, let's put a class name of product info price. And in our product info prop, we've got price, which as you can see is also displaying as well. So don't forget all of these properties are actually coming in from this server, from the API, if you will. So if we went into the actual data that's inside of here and changed anything, so if we, for example, made the price $30 and just refresh the page, you can see when we get a fresh copy of the data, the price is actually updated. So that's obviously why this makes it really dynamic rather than having to hard code all of the values inside of the component. Okay, so if we have a look at the template, the next thing is actually a star rating system, and I'm going to come back to that towards the end because we're going to create a separate component to handle that for us. So let's just crack on with the rest of the product info. So the next thing we had was the product info color. So that's just on the prop product info dot color, and it's actually an object that has a property called name. And the rest of that particular object, it actually has a hex value as well, so that we can actually display this little ball next to it with the actual color. So I'll use that to actually create that little icon next to the product info color. So what we'll actually do, instead of having this in just one div here, we'll put some spans inside it so that we can target it separately with CSS. And I'll create another span in here and I'll give that a different class name so we can target it and just call it sample. What I'll actually do is just use the style property here of the span and pass that in an object, and I can just basically say the background color is equal to the product info dot color dot value. Okay, so we can't see anything with that at the moment, but when we go and add our styles in just a second, we'll put some CSS in there to make that appear like it does in the template. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is to put in the features of the product. So let's just create a div and give that a class name of product info features. And this is actually going to be an unordered list with the list items being repeated. And if we look at the JSON one more time, you can see the features is actually an array of strings. So we want to loop through and put all of these on their own individual bullet point. So the way we're going to do that is we've got the li element here, but we're actually going to loop through the product info dot features and map that to some separate JSX. So within the map function, I'm actually going to get the text itself for each of those items in the array, but I also want to get the index as well because I'm going to be using that as the key for each of the list items that we create. So let's just implicitly return this bit of JSX here. Just missing a brace there, that's it. So for these list items, what we're going to do is set the key equal to the index, so they've got a unique key each. And then inside of the list item, we're just going to map in there the text. So what will happen is we'll get this list of features, loop through the array, grab the text and the index, and then just map those to individual list item elements on the page. So if we have a look at how that looks now, you can see all of those features that were in the JSON file are being mapped to list items. And we can tell they're list items because they've obviously got the bullet point before them. So if we have a look on the template, you can see there's a kind of size label there, and then there's a select box, which will allow us to select different sizes. So we can do that quite easily with our JSX code. So let's first of all just put a class name on here. So product info and then sizes. So we can target that in a moment. We'll put inside here a span, and that is going to be our label. I guess it should be a label actually, really, not a span. So let's put that there. And then we've got our select box, and we're going to do a similar thing that we did with the list item above for product features. But in this case, we're going to get product info and the sizes, which, let's check the JSON again. You can see it's just an array of numbers essentially, but as strings. So that's fine. So for each sizes, we're going to map those again, and we'll do the same thing that we did basically, is get the size, get the index, and in our array, we're going to return some JSX, but this time it's going to be an option element. And we first of all need to set the key. And also, just for completeness, I'm going to set the value property here equal to the size, although we're not really going to do anything with it in this tutorial, but it's just there for completeness. And then we're just going to output the size as the actual text for each of those options. Okay, so if we save that and have a look at it in the browser now, you can see we've got our label, and we've also got our select box that has all of the items that were in the sizes array within our product.json file. So that's pretty cool. Let's actually finish this off now by putting in the class name for product info. And this is going to be the add to cart button at the bottom, which will literally just be a button and add to cart. And before you criticize my spelling, that is exactly how it is spelt on the actual template as well. So that's just keep that for consistency. Okay, so before we go any further, let's actually style this component here because there's a lot of things missing and we need it to be up in the right place. So to create a new style file within our app, let's just create a new SCSS file, and we'll call it productinfo.scss. And then in our main app.scss file, you can see here we've got some defaults to get us set up already, but what we can do is import the product info SCSS file that we've just created. So let's go over to that now. Okay, so I'm going to whip through these rules pretty quickly so we can get on to making our next component. But let's just first of all create a class of product info, and I'm going to say it's display as flex, and it's going to be a flex direction of column. We'll align everything into the center, and just to be sure, we'll make sure justify content is set to flex start. Okay, so let's target the heading level 2 tag, which was essentially the sparks, the title of the actual product. So 3 rem for the font size, and just a bit of margin around there as well. Let's then target the heading level 3 tag, and again we'll set the font size to a slightly smaller font, but still relatively large, and set the font weight to be 300, a bit lighter, and also we'll add some margin onto that too. Let's just close down the developer tools here now. And then we're going to be targeting the price section next. And we're just going to be setting some font sizes on these basically. So font size 1.8 rems. Put a bit more margin around this one. And now we're targeting the color. So we're going to set the font size again to 1.8 rems and some margin. But remember we had the sample span that we put inside there as well. So that wasn't appearing at the moment, or it still isn't. So let's set some width on that, 1.5 rems. So that gives us a squarish block there, and we are actually going to change the display of that because it's a span at the moment. It needs to be block to be take those height and width properties. We'll set the vertical alignment to middle so that it lines up with the actual label as well. And to give us our circular look, we'll just say a border radius of 50%. Okay, finally just a bit of margin left on there just so that it moves away from the label a little bit. And that doesn't seem to be updating, so let's see if we've got a typo. So I've probably misspelled color in the component. I guess if you're American, then that is the correct spelling, but for me, it's incorrect. So that is what it should look like. Yeah, okay. So there you go. We see we've got the label and we've got this little ball appearing with a sample of the color. So that is now being picked up. Okay, so we just need to do a little bit more targeting on the features and other bits and pieces. So features, don't forget that's got those list item elements in there. So I'm just going to reduce the font weight a little bit. And also for the marker, which is the bullet point essentially, I'm just going to say use the gray variable color that we've got set up, just so it matches the design a little bit more. And that's all we need to do for features. And for the sizes select box, let's make the font size a bit bigger, so 1.4 rem. The font weight is going to be 300, and display, let's set that to flex, and align items in the center. Okay, so now we need to actually target the select box in there to just tidy that up a bit. So let's put a bit of margin on the left. 0.5 rem should do it, and I'm also going to increase the border radius on that as well. Just set it to 0.5 rems. The width, let's make that a bit bigger, so 3 rems, and just put a bit of padding inside it as well, so 0.2 rem should be good. There you go, we've got our select box now, which is just looking a bit tidier. So the very last thing we've got within this component for product info is the add to cart button. So that's just called add to cart. So it's put a bit of margin on the top so it's pushed down from the rest of the product info. And of course there's the button inside there as well. So the background color is, we've got a variable called highlight in our app.scss file. And let's just set the actual text color to white. Remove any border, a bit of padding on it as well. So 0.5 on the top and bottom, 1 on the left and right. Increase the font size, and a slight amount of border radius as well. So 0.5 rems for that. There you go, we've got our add to cart button. Okay, so that is all of the styles for the product info, but it's not actually appearing next to the actual main image. So in our product.js, we actually created a class, I believe. Yep, so for the product, it's just got an actual class name of product. So let's create another SCSS file, just called product, and let's just make sure that's imported into our app.scss. I guess it should come before. And in here, we're just going to add a couple of rules in for the product. So this is the overall thing again. So 1100 pixels width. And we'll set the product main class, which just contains the top bits up here, to be flex. And make sure they're spaced between and aligned center. So there you go, they're appearing side by side now. So we're going to come down to the related items section now. And once we've done that, we'll then finish off the tutorial with the star rating component as well. But let's go into our related items component now and fill that out in with all of the necessary details that it needs. So in here, it has a heading level 2 tag. As per the template that says customers who bought this item also bought. So let's add that in there. Customers who bought this item also bought. Let's put some ellipse there. And I think what I'm going to do here, rather than looping through all of the related items and putting all of the markup in here, I'm going to create a separate component. I think I said at the start of the tutorial, because this is basically the same markup each time, the same JSX, just with different details, it makes sense to create those as separate components. So let's create a new component file, and I will call it related item, singular. And let's just do our setup with our boilerplate. So import React, and then const related item is a function, and just export that as the default. So let's actually use this inside of the related items component. I probably should have called them something different because they're pretty easy to confuse with the file names. So we'll give this container here a class of related products. And then what I'm going to do for all of the related products that are passed in as props, we'll say related products.map, and we're going to get each product, and we're going to return some JSX here. So let's have a look at the JSON again for this. So with related products, it's a bit meatier. We've got an array, but there's an object inside each item in the array, and they've got the image, the title, etc. like this. And quite handily, it's got this product code, which we can actually use for our key. So rather than using the index of the position of the item in the array, we'll actually use that as our key. So we're going to be returning a, no, it's not product, is it? It's a related item. And the key for that is basically going to be the product, which we're getting here from the array. Is it product code? I'll have to go back and check. It's, yes, product code. So product code. And then we obviously want to pass in the product as well, which will be the overall product itself that's come from the array. Okay, so let's start filling out this related item. So we're going to get a prop come through, which is product. And we don't need to do much with the data other than return our template, our JSX. So we're going to have an overall div with a class name of product summary. And inside that, we'll have another div with a class name of product summary image wrapper for the image. And that will just contain an image. And essentially, we'll just pass the URL of the image into that. But first, let's just create another class on there called image. And the source is equal to product.image. Okay, that'll handle the image for us. Let's now put in the actual text for it. So we'll have a p tag. And this has a class name of product summary title. And from that, oops, too many braces there. It's product title. Now let's just copy this another few times. So we've got product title, and then the next thing is the product code, which is displayed. And then the next thing is the price. Okay, so that's all of the actual template in there. So let's just refer back to the original design. So you can see we've got the image, we've got the title, we've got the product code, and also the price. And again, we're going to come back to this star rating in just a moment. Okay, so if we reload the page, you can see those related items are now appearing, and we've got all of the data that we need in there as well. We just need to style them really. So let's create a style sheet for our related item and make sure that it's imported here too. Okay, so we just need a few bits and pieces in here. Let's first of all target the product summary class. I'm going to set the width to 22%. We'd probably need to do something a bit clever if we knew we weren't getting 4 related products, but that'll do for our test data that we've got here. And so text align center. And let's target that image wrapper class that we created or used in the JSX a moment ago. And to give it the frame around the image, we'll put a border, solid grey, and have a little bit of border radius on there as well. So 0.5 rems is fine. Bit of padding, 0.5 rem. And let's specify a height as well, so it takes up a specific amount of space. You can see we've now got the frame around all of the images as well now. Okay, so a couple of extra things here. The title itself, we'll just reduce the font size just ever so slightly there. And then the product code, we'll just set the color of that to blue. There you go, that's very much like the design in the original template. Okay, so we actually need to get these to display across the page as well. So in the related items file, we did put a class name here for related products. So let's create one final SCSS file here for that and include it here. And so for that related products class, it's just going to simply be a case of setting the display to flex and also saying justify content space between. So there you go, we've got our layout and we've got our components, and the really cool thing here was that we were able to reuse the related item component and just pass the data for each related product down into that, and the display works just fine. Okay, so there's one thing missing from the actual finished product now, and that is the star component. We've got a couple of images here, so we've got a star filled image and also a star empty image, and we're just going to create a separate component that will display the number of stars depending on the results that are brought back to us from the product.json. So you can see here on the related products, for example, we've got a star rating as a number of stars, and for the overall product as well as a rating of 4 as well. So we're going to use those numbers to work out how many stars we should actually display in the star component. Okay, so let's go ahead and create that component now. So just a case of creating a new file, and it's called star rating, for example. And we're going to import React. And then also we're just going to create the component, which is a function. And then just export it from the file. Okay, so for the star rating, we're going to expect a prop, and we'll just call that prop stars. And to handle the amount of stars that we need to actually display, I'm going to create an array called star array. And then I'm just going to work out whether it should be an empty star or a full star, depending on the number of stars that we've got. So let's loop basically from 1 to 5. So set I at 0 and loop until we hit 5 and increment at each repetition. At each repetition, we're basically going to add something to the star array, and I'm going to add true or false depending on whether the stars value that's been passed in is bigger than the current value of I. So if you've got 3 stars that have been passed in this stars prop, we'll have true, 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 and then false, false. Or likewise, if we've only got 1 star, then we'll get a true followed by 4 falses. So that'll just enable us to work out which actual image we're going to display, depending on the results that have been put into this array. And that makes things really handy when we come to do our JSX. So let's create a new div to hold this, and we'll just call it star rating. Oops, star rating. And we're going to loop through this star array. We'll actually just map it. And for each item, we're going to get the star, which will be true or false. And we'll also get the index for our key as well. Okay, so we're just going to return some JSX here, and it'll be an image tag. And let's set the key to the index. And the source is going to be basically based off a ternary operator based off of the star. So if the star is truthy, we'll do one thing, and if the star is falsy, as in the value in the array is falsy, then we'll display something else. So a cool thing we can do with our Webpack setup is just to basically import the 2 star images. So we'll say the filled star, import that from, and it's a file called star_filled.png. And for the other one, we'll say there's an empty star, and we'll just import that from the star empty.png file. And then right down here in our JSX, we can actually use those variable names to display the correct star. So if the star is truthy, if the item in the array has been put in as a true value, then we'll use star filled, but if not, we'll use star empty. Okay, so let's test that out and see if that works okay. So the component is just called star rating. So let's try it out in the product info component to start off with. So let's put that up here. And I think in the original template, it was just below the price. So where's our price? Our price is here. So our star rating, and of course, don't forget it needs to have a prop of stars, is equal to the product info dot rating, I think it was, in the JSON. So if we save that. Oh, and I think we've got an error. I bet it's because we haven't imported it into here. So let's just make sure we've got that here. Star rating from the star rating file. Okay, we've still not got any output there, so we've probably got an error. Let's have a look in the console and see what happens there. And okay, star empty is not defined. I've probably called something wrong here. So we've got filled star and empty star, and I've used star filled. I've used them completely the wrong way around. So filled star and empty star. Okay, so hopefully that should get rid of that error for us. Okay, so that seems to be working okay. The only problem is we don't seem to have any stars filled in there. So let me just check if product.json, it was indeed rating. So yes, it was. And okay, so I think I might know what it is. So in product.js, so yeah, when we destructured all of this information before, we didn't include rating in there. So let's make sure it's just in that one and in that one there. Okay, and when the page is reloaded, you can see the stars are now appearing. So the really good thing about making this star rating component is now we can reuse it in these related items as well. Or indeed, if this was a larger application, we could use it anywhere else as well. And all we need to do is pass it in a number, and it will display the number of stars that we've passed in. So let's have a look at related item. So related product, I think it was stars in the JSON. Let me just double check. Yeah, so each related product, you've got a stars property. So as long as we import the star rating component from star rating, then we can use that in here. Actually, we don't want to use it in here. We're in the related items. I told you that'd be really confusing. So we want the singular related items component, but we can just pop that in there. And in the original design, it was just before the price. So here we've got our price. So just before we finish that off, we'll put in a star rating component. And all we've got to do is pass in the stars prop, and that will be on the product.stars. You can see all of the star ratings are now being applied to the related products as well. Okay, so that is pretty much it for this tutorial. Hopefully you've seen how you can set up a basic React app and also break down a design into separate components. We could of course gone a little bit further with breaking things down again. For example, things like the call to action button, because we're probably going to be reusing that throughout our application. And possibly things like the colors up here as well, so that could be broken down into a further component. But hopefully you've got the idea of how you can do that and seen the benefit of breaking things down into a component and how you can reuse them. And it helps keep your code nice and neat as well. So as always, thanks very much for watching. If you do have a second before you leave, don't forget to subscribe to support the channel and so you don't miss out on any future tutorials. And I'll see you next time.